I believe we're recording. So thank you very much, everybody. It's lovely to be on such a gorgeous evening as tonight, and just that shows real commitment, I think, because it's so beautiful outside that I'm sure some people have made a very good choice, and they've said, in this moment, I'm going to sit in the sun, and we'll watch the recording later. And that is the beauty of webinar, isn't it? And the other thing about it is you have your recording for years to come. So when we get ourselves into a situation and you want to think, what did we do session 5? That there might be something on there that can really help me through this difficult time. And it might just be that what you find is tonight's topic. Within mindfulness-based stress reduction courses, session 5 is always the accepting and letting go. And because we are listening and to the comments and the suggestions you guys make, we are adding and playing with the course content to make it much more specific for this incredible times that we're living in. And I think when we look back, it will be one of those things that people will talk about this time for probably hundreds of years, and we're right in the middle of it. And back to the wonderful Viktor Frankl, it's our response that matters, isn't it? And in tuning in tonight, you're responding really well. So how lovely is that? So we are looking at accepting and letting go. But as always, let's just remind ourselves, as I do my first double press of the day, let's just remind ourselves. So welcome back. I'm not anticipating anybody coming in for the first time tonight, but if there is, hi. And our overall aim of the course, as the slide says, is helping us to deal better with stress, anxiety, over worrying, which is a huge thing, and the impact that this difficult time might be having on our mood, although we've already heard that some people are using strategies and finding their way to a place of happiness despite, and that's so lovely to hear. And so let's just have a think now about sleep. So, and this is the first bit of us responding to your requests. So I've had a few people contact me to say that those people that have tried Leaves on a Stream, some people always do really, really well to use Leaves on a Stream to help them just drop off. And I had some interesting correspondence this week from a few people that said that they're just not visualizers. So something that we're sending out tonight is I've done a new recording of one of the most evidence-based meditations there is the body scan for sleep. And because this is one of our aims of this course is to increase our psychological flexibility, then in having a choice perhaps of, maybe I use the Leaves on a Stream if I'm struggling with sleep, or maybe I give the body scan for sleep a go as well. So I've recorded that and we'll send that out with the recordings. I'll send it to Susie and we'll send it out with the recordings tomorrow. So I'm just wondering, any thoughts on Leaves on a Stream from people? Anybody, any questions, any difficulties with that? Or are people finding that sleep is still an issue? Yeah, a few people coming back on that one. Let me just go and have a look, because I think we do want to hear. Yeah, Jack said he used it once. Emma likes Leaves on a Stream. Have a go, I think, if you're struggling. Sarah likes anything water-based. The body scan does, though I like the Leaves on a Stream concept. Yeah, I think the concept is very much linked to what we're doing today, isn't it? That whole thing of, with the Leaves on a Stream is we step back from the stuff that our mind sends us, and we find the flexibility to kind of look at it and decide whether we want it or not. Because, with the Leaves on a Stream meditation, there's nothing to stop you reaching in and grabbing that leaf back out, I suppose. But we choose just to see everything as just thoughts, just images, just worries, and we let them all go. So we're very much in tune. And Sally's saying she used the hourglass breathing. Yeah, I mean, I think if you've got something that really works, yeah. Simon's saying I use it a lot, but it's not working for me at the moment. It might be that what we need to do is try the body scan, and so that you're sort of mixing up. Oh, lovely to have Kay on. And she's saying in the middle of the night it doesn't seem to work. We weren't planning on doing this, but there is a wonderful technique called cognitive shuffling, which is a mindful process for when we wake in the middle of the night. And what we'll do is I'll pop that in for next week and see if we can't use the cognitive shuffling next week. And it's wonderful. I think I may have a film of cognitive shuffling actually somewhere on the YouTube site. So how are people doing with building their practice? And again, when I ask this question, it is with zero pressure, you know, because I was talking to a wonderful person this week, Kate, and she was saying that, you know, Mike, I really struggle to find the motivation to meditate. And I sort of sat and thought about that, and I thought, you know, I didn't start meditating until I was about 43, 42, 43 years old. And I think the time sometimes has to be right in your life when it feels just right to start meditating. And I always just think that, you know, you'll find it and just keep dipping in. But how are people doing? Yeah, I'll come back to that question, Kim. So are people beginning to build their practice? And I've built mine to where it's got to, which is between 15 and 20 minutes a day interspersed. And, you know, that just suits. How are people doing? Because we had a really interesting response last week. People seem to really like the silent meditation. So I'm wondering if people are enjoying the silent meditation. And one of my favorite meditations for times of difficulty is the 3-stage breathing space with difficulties, because it's one of those ones that encourages us to do that wonderful sort of open up and let stuff in, because you know, it's like stingless bees. If we think about it, you know, the stuff that our mind sends us very often purports to be scary, vibrant, buzzing very loudly, but actually it's like a bee with no sting. It's like a soft thud when it hits us. If that makes any sense at all. And how are people? Oh, that slide's a bit off. How are people ding with that pivoting? I've left an O out there. And I wonder whether people had a little look at the yoga. So I'm just going to go in and see what sort of responses we're getting from this. 10 minutes is my time frame, but when I spend far more time noticing, well, that's a wonderful point from Audrey, that actually you don't have to be meditating to be mindful. I'm able to do a silent meditation a couple of times a day. That's fantastic. Ellen, I'm finding the silent meditation really good because you can just do it anywhere. Fantastic point. That's one of the joys of that. Yeah, definitely. Silence helps turn everything off and just breathe. I think it's the just breathe that we're really encouraging. Yeah, I love the 5 minutes, but find I relax so much I start to doze off. And you're right, not complaining at all. Because do you know what? It's this thing about no judgment. And that's one of the joys of this mindfulness stance, isn't it? Thank you so much, everybody. So it does feel like we are turning into a real group of mindful people. And some of you were already, I'm absolutely sure, but even more mindful people. Jack's been saying he's been using the pivoting and the 3 stages to unhook. And it's working, although sometimes it's hard. Love to hear that, Jack. We're going to have a look at another pivot later, and we're going to really focus on letting go and unhooking today. So I'm just going to see if I can do a single press to get to just one slide. There we go. So I thought I'd share this slide with you because we're going to do a silent meditation in a minute. But this is some of the, I really think this is just so interesting. And so it's this sense of how the silent meditation works, because um, as we practice silent meditation, we do start to shift from being very much in the conscious mind, where we are aware that our mind is still thinking, is still processing. We move through sometimes as we dive deeper into the silence, that we kind of get what we call that innermost silence. So we go beyond just the silence in the room, and we find a real sort of deep silence. And to find that, we need to start extending our silent meditation just up a bit, you know. And what I recommend to do that is if you go on Google and you put silent meditation with bells, the bells I use and others, the website will give you a choice of the time. So you can do a 7 minute with bells, an 8 minute, a 10 minute, a 14 minute. And I just find having the bells at either end is kind of reassuring. And the final one there is that we start to, as we go right in and we get better at the silent meditation, we start to get really quite good at flexing between our conscious mind and taking ourselves right into that real deep innermost silence. And so diving into silence, resting in silence, and then living from silence. And so that's where we're sort of taking ourselves. That's the direction of travel. And because we got such, you know, we're getting the feedback, and I'm going to keep coming in. Odd question. How do you know what note or tone your bells are? Because I like them. Oh, do you know, I haven't got a clue. That one, they were present. But these are, some bells are real clashes. I reckon it's luck.
Aren't
Or
they Buddhist bells?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
thought they were.
yeah, and they are, these are a lovely set of bells. I did have some ones before, but they used to make the dog whimper when they went off, because they were quite discordant. So, in line with what we've just shared then, I'd like to move in, and again, just 5 minutes of the silent meditation, bells in, bells out. But in order to go deeper and to allow our mind to take us a bit deeper, I'd like to really focus on a silent meditation. So that means you might go to your breath, you might deviate from the breath to the body, you might, as Helen does, focus on sounds, you might focus on temperature, you might want to just try and just see where your mind takes you, and not make any intention to focus on the breath, but just in the quietness and in the silence, perhaps see where your mind takes you. If you find yourself, however, getting busy and your mind moving from just sitting in silence to what's for tea, worried about this, thinking about that, what I'd like to try today is to use the labeling. And so whenever we find that our mind is wandering, the first thing is the smile, that mindful half smile of absolute acceptance. And that's, well, it's what brains do, isn't it? They go wandering. And then we go and find with curiosity. It's almost like you imagine donning a sort of lab coat, you know, and becoming that curious scientist. Why has my brain taken me here? And just meeting it with curiosity, just for a moment or two. And then, because today is about accepting and letting go of the curiosity back to the silence. So that's our, I'd really like us, please, to play with that, because as we start to get very, very good at meeting our disturbances with curiosity, then tomorrow, the next day, or the next day, something will happen in your lives. And instead of meeting it with aversion, or instead of meeting it with anger or frustration, weirdly, you'll find, and it's something I found, and it was a real sort of, oh gosh, did I really do that? That you're meeting things that happen in our lives so differently. You're meeting them with curiosity, and that's a real gentle ooh, what's that about? Why did I walk through the doors of work and suddenly that odd feeling came? What's that about? Oh, I know what that's about. And let go. And the silent meditation with the labeling really starts to train our mind to meet the stuff of the day with that lovely mindful curiosity. So, as always, this is the bit where Susie always looks dignified, but I'm very much aware that I'm going to come out of my semi slouch here, and because I'm really could do with this silent meditation tonight. And so, if we make ourselves look dignified, and again, just imagine before we start that you're sitting and you're looking at yourself in a mirror and you're just asking, do I look dignified? And just gently shift and make yourself look dignified. So, silent meditation, just 5 minutes. Well done, everybody. And I hope that you were able to sort of just play with that a little bit, that sense of, where's my brain taking me, the curiosity, the meeting it, and yeah, doing enough.
I don't believe it's 5 minutes. It seems.
It was, I think.
Yes, I think it was,
Yeah,
but you just drift, don't you? Which is lovely.
yeah, really hard. Found it hard not to get distracted by noises around me. Helped to use my breath as an anchor. Brilliant. Well done, Michelle, because that's what we want, is when you're sure you go off, and sitting in that dignified way seems to help. Yeah, the dignified, I think. I remember um, this explained it to me when I went on my mindfulness retreat. And what the guy was explaining to me about it was, I think I asked a similar question, but I think it came more from, do I really have to sit like this? And he explained that actually, if we're looking dignified and calm and we have that mindful half smile on, the brain knows we're safe. And so there's less reactivity going on. Michelle says it did go quickly. Emma found it peaceful. Yeah, relaxing. Found it hard this evening, but um, agree, breath as the anchor helps to draw you back in. Jack found the labeling really interesting, particularly when you went deep into thoughts, and Beth's telling us it's getting easier. Yeah. Well, I like this, Sarah. It made me aware of other senses. I could feel a breeze on my face and my feet felt grounded. And I think that's what you get, isn't it, from doing a silent meditation. Well done, everybody. That was fantastic. People really, really sort of enjoying it and getting it. So thanks. Oh, um, as people come in, I just really like that. Yeah, Johnny went really quick, and I really want to put it into practice. And well, one of those things that we just don't need anything other than ourselves, do we? And that thing about, we have to have a quiet room, we really don't, because if there's a few distractions here and there, and bird song or the sounds and smells coming in, it just hones our practice to be able to kind of go and bring back. So it's the bringing back that's the real mindfulness. Yeah, yeah. And a song came to mind for Kim. And isn't that interesting that, our brain sends us this stuff that we possibly even need at these times? So we're going to move on, and apologies to those of you who I've shared this with before, but we're looking with real specificity today at the importance of being able to, because we just did it then, of being able to curiously meet thoughts with no aversion, without trying to get rid of them, um, without crossness that these flipping thoughts keep showing up, but to actually start to step back, like we do with leaves on a stream a little bit, and say, do you know, because at the moment we get so bothered by thoughts, don't we? And we're bombarded with such a lot of negativity that we can really find ourselves and our mind beginning to spiral and go to places that it wouldn't normally go to. So our fear response is more sort of is more prescient at the moment for so many people. And also there's frustrations and anger and doubt and uncertainty. And when we're living with this stuff, it's almost like the seedbed for our mind to start churning these thoughts out. And as the great Viktor Frankl says, it's between stimulus and response, there's that space. So the thought comes, and if we can find the space to respond to the thought with curiosity, with a bit of wisdom, with um, equanimity, just what will be, will be. And if we can find the ability to do that, then it doesn't matter if thoughts come, because they are just thoughts. And as I've said here, can you think of times when you've had a thought about yourself? This is bound to happen today. This is so going to happen to me today. And sometimes it does, but more often than not, it doesn't. Or a thought about someone else that you believed to be totally true, but turned out to be absolutely inaccurate. And if you just stop and think about that for a moment, that sort of stuff happens on a daily basis, but maybe we're not mindful to, maybe we're not mindful enough at the moment to actually realize that our brain is always sending us this kind of churning out this sort of stuff. And if it's not getting our attention, the brain will churn out something that guaranteed to get our attention because it will cause anxiety or worry or doubt or low mood. And so the exercise I want to share with you today is being mindful about the nature of thoughts. And so, as you can see here, I just want us all to play a bit of a game. And if we can use the hands up process, and those of you that are aware of this work, or I may have shared it with you before, it's just such a great one to remind ourselves about. And it's one of my go-tos really for thoughts. So I want you all to imagine that our session tonight finishes and you leave and go out into the lovely, lovely sunshine. And just as you're going, your phone pings and because, the Pavlov dog response is well in us humans now, isn't it? And so we go to the phone and we feel driven to go and check who was pinging me, what was pinging me. And we notice that it's a message has come to you from perhaps your bank, and it's probably one of these on my slide. And the message has come from your bank, and it's come accompanied with the logo, so it looks very bona fide. And the message says that unfortunately your account has been hacked, and that you must respond immediately by sending the bank all of your security information so that they can secure your account and you won't be robbed. And so right now, how many of us are immediately doing as you're told and sending the bank all of your security information? And this is when I just go on. Two people had said that they would. Really? You're teasing me. No, yeah, no. So the vast majority of us, I think you are teasing me there. The vast majority of us, I think at that point are saying, oh, no, goodness, no, I know not to do that. I wouldn't dare do that. And what we've done in that moment there is we've stopped, and there's been the stimulus of that message from whoever, and it's come flying into our consciousness in exactly the same way that thoughts come. It's attached with some threat, your account will be robbed, but we've created some space, just enough space to kind of curiously go, do I need to do that? And then what's happened is our critical thinking skills have kicked in, and we've used our critical thinking skills to look at it and go, no. And our tacit knowledge, I'm sure I heard somewhere that we should never respond to a text like that. Yeah. And so we stop and we find some clarity and we think carefully about it. Now, you know what happens with worrying thoughts? We meet them with curiosity, just like during the meditative process. 2 minutes later, boom, another one comes. And this time it's supercharged with extra fear. So the bank sends you another one. And this time it says, we notice you haven't responded to our last information. This is a very, very dangerous hack. And not only will your account be frozen, but you will be fined if you don't respond by sending us your secure information. So the threat increases. And at this stage, I wonder whether we will find enough mindful curiosity to be curious enough to phone or to go online and, is there a sort of hack being made of NatWest Bank at the moment? And we check it out. Now, we can do that. We can all do that. We all just did it just then. But when we get a thought that comes in, and that thought comes in and says, you were rubbish today, or that thought comes in and says, did you notice the way people looked at you today? They really don't like you. or a really worrying thought about one of our children or something like that, you know, they're not going to be safe. And one of those thoughts comes in, and the problem is if we don't create that space and we don't meet that thought with that mindful curiosity we explored in the silent meditation, those are the sort of thoughts that steamroll over us during a time like this, during COVID-19. And immediately, it's almost as though our brain takes over executive control of us, doesn't it? And we find ourselves then pushed around and driven by what ostensibly are words and pictures, because that's all thoughts are. And this isn't about me saying that every thought we get is inaccurate, not at all. What I'm saying is, we aren't saying this is spam. We're asking the question, do you know, is my mind spamming me here? Why would it spam me about this? Why would it? Because it wants me to be a bit more vigilant, because it's very dangerous out there. Oh, right. Thank you, brain. Do you know, thanks for that bit of spam. But maybe I won't choose to act on it, or maybe I will. But essentially, if we're curious enough to check out, because sometimes we'll come in and we'll say, do you know, I don't think that is spam. I think my brain is right here. This is something I need to attend to. Brilliant. Psychological flexibility, mindful choice. So there is this shift, and when we start to think about the role of mindfulness in this, it brings us to today's pivot. So I'm just going to show you something. So if I had, imagine a negative thought that might show up about yourself for a moment. Please don't make it a real nasty, schematic, horrible one. Just a real kind of, a real sort of, I'm a bit useless, or I won't be able to do the meditation this week because I'm not feeling up to it. One of those sorts of thoughts. And just imagine the thought is written on my diary here. Now, if that thought gets to there and it completely blocks out the ability to see any other reality, it completely gets us stuck. And this is what happens when we find ourselves pivoted into and fused with a really difficult, usually self-critical thought. So this happens. And what we want to happen is this. We want to just take our attention and pivot away so that we can see the thought for what it really is, words and pictures, and make choices about how I'm going to respond to that thought. So the pivot is essentially doing that, from a fused thought to the point where we have choices about whether we buy into that thought, be curious with that thought, or like leaves on a stream, let that thought just go. So the pivot works again with the movement, and Jack, who's on tonight, helped me with this, because I think with this one here, it's quite nice to say that the center is where we're pivoting to. And so when we have a thought that absolutely comes in and whoomph, and it's a real difficult thought, we create our calm, and we find that mindful space, and we just turn ourselves in, and we just notice that, okay, so this thought at the moment feels 100% true. Gosh, how does that feel to engage with that thought as though it were the absolute truth? Okay, doesn't feel good. So I just pivot out of it, and I pivot all the way to there. And that's that this thought is 100% inaccurate. Maybe there's a kernel of truth in there. I'm not sure. And I just pivot myself back to the middle ground. And with most distressing, difficult thoughts, there is sometimes just a kind of kernel of reality there, you know, just a kernel of it, but not the whole damning thought in itself. So the whole pivot there is we're pivoting from being stuck with a thought, and we use the movement to say, okay, let's just leave it, leave it, leave it, leave it. Okay, curious. So yeah, no. Well, maybe there's back to the middle ground. Yeah, there's a tiny bit of common sense in there. There's a bit of truth in there, but actually, no. And right then we have the choice. So what we're not doing is that rigid right or wrong with thoughts. We're pivoting to find the flexibility to be curious about our thoughts. So we're finding that ability to diffuse from our thoughts, because we don't want to get stuck and as though thoughts had attached to us as though they were 100% real. We're just taking them there so we can look at them and decide how we're going to respond to them mindfully. See how you go with that one, because if we can start to shift that, yeah, then boy, I wouldn't trust that at all. People are coming, yeah, I could ring you in person. I'd give in. I was just thinking, yeah. So somebody's just saying the thought I had about myself was useless. Yeah, yeah. Interesting. So learning to pivot. So the pivots we've done is to pivot from the present, from being out of the present moment back into the present moment, perceive self back into actual self or observing self, and pivoting from a fused state of thinking into the state where we can make choices about whether that thought is something we want to respond to or not. So we move on to our new meditation today. And we're going to do a meditation for those times when we find ourselves getting hooked. And what I mean by hooked is when we really find that a thought or a memory or an emotion has absolutely got right inside us and got us hooked. One of those things that you just can't let go of, and it bugs you all day long, and it starts to sort of interrupt our sort of joy. And sometimes what we'll find is we can use that unhooking process to meet that difficulty with absolute curiosity, mindful curiosity, and develop an understanding about why that hook is showing up now. But sometimes we can actually completely unhook from the emotion or the difficulty. So in a moment, I'm just going to ask you to think about a time, about something that's hooked you today or yesterday. And I'll give you an example of a hook. So my wife is down looking after my mother-in-law down in Cornwall, and I was kind of joking about it, which wasn't the most Christian or kind thing to do, but I was sort of joking about it and saying, I'm so glad I'm not there, because me and my mother-in-law don't actually see eye to eye all the time. And I really got hooked with a sense of, that's really unkind, Mike Scanlon. You're not a good man. That's not a good thing. And I really couldn't shift this sense of being a bit sort of down on myself for being, and not really thinking about stuff, And I got well and truly hooked, and I used the mind Aikido, and I unhooked. So sometimes it's when we've got, sometimes it can be a fear hook, sometimes it can be a really petty hook. Something like when somebody doesn't say thank you, and it bugs you all day, or somebody pushes into you in a queue and you're cross with yourself because you didn't stand up for yourself. These are all examples. So I'm just going to ask you all, can you just find a time when you've been hooked, and just see if you can think of anything. If anyone wants to share what their hook is that they're going to work with today, that might give other people some ideas. Any ideas of anything? We're going to do this as a meditation, and I'm going to actually record it as we go, the wonders of technology. So I've got my iPad all ready here, and I'm going to actually record it as we do it, and then send this one out as we go. So we're going to do a live recording today. So I'm just going to ask you all to get into it. This is one that's generally done in a seated position because it isn't one that we want to drop off on. So I'm just going to take you through the mind Aikido, or the unhooking meditative process. So if we can all just make ourselves look dignified and relax into it, notice any thoughts of ooh, and it's just words and pictures, feelings, that's all we're looking at. So, mind Aikido. So if we can just stop and remind ourselves that we can at any time anchor our attention to this present moment by just using our breath. So let's go find our breath. It's always there, isn't it? And we anchor our attention to the breath, and we feel that sense of, yeah, coming home to the breath. And then we just stop and we think, okay, so who matters in my life? And if we're able to, and I'm aware not everybody can, just start to picture or to get a sense of the people that really matter to you. Welcome them in and smile at them. And what's the stuff of life that really matters to you? Making a difference, having fun, family time, your home, nature, music. What's the stuff of life that matters? We connect with that first. And we just roll our shoulders back and we smile at that stuff. Because this is the stuff that matters. And we hold that and we just park that because we're going to need it later. And we smile and we say, okay, so what's hooked me today? What have I got hooked by? What maybe is still just kind of hooking me? And we just sit in and we ask ourselves, why does this hook make me feel uncomfortable or sad or cross even? Yeah. And we use our 5 senses. So we just really lean in and we explore it. Very similarly to the 3-stage breathing space with difficulties. We let it in and we just look at this stuff. Oh, yeah. This is definitely a hook. And how does it feel right now? And we body scan. Where is that hook sitting in your body right now? Where can we feel that emotional hook, that fear hook, that sad hook, that difficult hook? Where's it sitting? And it's always right there in the solar plexus for me. Go and find where your hook sits physically. And smile and breathe. One lovely gentle breath in and let it go. And just relax. And just for a moment, see if you can picture in your mind's eye or just get a sense of how you respond or react when you're hooked by this particular hook. Because I'll bet this isn't the first time this hook has shown up. And I see myself being stubborn and cross. I see myself being critical, overcritical with myself. I see myself being short and angry with the people that I love and like. And I see myself being distracted and quite unhappy. Okay. And I let go. And now I smile. And I ask myself this really simple question. So how does the man or the woman you are, how do you see them responding when they too are hooked by this difficult stuff? How do they respond? How do you see from your observing self, how do you see the you want to be dealing with this particular hook? And I see myself dealing with it with calmness, with kindness, with compassion. I see myself doing this with a smile of acceptance. And I see myself letting go, being hooked and letting go again. Yeah. And we just let that in. And we almost get the dichotomy of how that is compared to how I sometimes find myself when I'm hooked. And this works. Yeah, I like that. And then we just ask ourselves, so how would it be if I could find that version of me more often? How would it be if I could unhook from this stuff and find that better, more mindful response to the hooks of life? And then finally, I go to where I've parked the stuff that matters and I retrieve it. And I remind myself, and you remind yourselves, please, of the people that actually really matter. And the stuff of life that really matters. And if this was a inconsequential, perhaps irritant, angry hook, if this was a hook of crossness or jealousy or envy, then notice that you've just pretty much unhooked from that. And if what you find is that that hook is still there, why does this thing that showed up, why does it bug me? Because it is part of my value set. It is linked to the stuff that really matters. And so I decide to look at that hook and to treat it and meet it with curiosity. And I stop and I check my breathing. And I respond again by checking my body. And I take my attention to where that hook was and where it might still be. And I just notice whether I've managed to just move myself to a better place, whether I've just begun the process of learning to unhook mindfully. And when you're ready, very gently, just open your eyes and come back to the room. And I've done a film of this process, the unhooking process, and I shall email that to Susie as well. So you've got a standalone. And I've got to say that one of the things I do in one-to-one therapy when we're using a mindful stance, which is usually an acceptance style, if you can find and play with this, because there are no rules with unhooking, and you can find out when it works best for you and when you're not able to unhook. But when you're not able to unhook, it's really important that you do meet whatever the hook is with curiosity. And so I'm hoping people are going to be able to use that during this difficult time, because, yeah, gosh, coming back to things that matter was very emotional. Yeah, absolutely. Happy tears. Yeah, I've got a tear in my eye actually from the thing I unhooked from.
Yeah.
It's lovely. And you know, when you unhook, the lovely thing about mindfulness and the body scan that you've all been practicing is you get to really feel the unhook. Oh, and does that feel liberating, you know? To be liberated from some of this stuff that just keeps hooking us. And it's something that we probably need to do 2 or 3 times a day, sometimes, at least once a day, is unhook when we find ourselves hooked. And I know that took us about 7 minutes, but to be honest, when you've been doing it for a little while, the unhooking takes all of about 40 seconds. You sort of whiz through those steps. Yeah, you know? And sometimes when it requires us to, we should stop and actually use the meditative process and unhook slowly and carefully. So I hope people found that interesting, and I hope people are going to find that one useful. Visualizing how I want to be was very powerful. I actually felt empathy for the person I was thinking about. Cage, you know, that is one of the really common ones. And I actually, weirdly, because me and my mother-in-law have had a very interesting relationship for many years, but I actually properly got to that point where I unhooked from all of the sadness and the crossness itself, and actually found a sort of chuckle, you know, and a little tiny bit of warmth for her. So you can, and it was emotional. And so, yeah, thank you all. So, gosh, we are doing some really quite interesting stuff, and I love this poem, and so I'm just going to share it with you because I think it is this thing of what we're experiencing today. And in my therapy room, I have the guest house poem in a picture, and I just have that in the room. So this being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. And that's a Rumi poem, comes from the Sufi tradition within Islam. And I think that very much is linked to the unhooking, isn't it? It's that if we keep pushing things away, we never learn from our unhooking or the hooks that get us. And so I love that poem. And I think it's it's not an easy poem. I think sometimes we sort of brindle at some of that stuff, but it's worth another look. So we're going to ask you to keep building this practice. And my suggestion is go onto Google and build the silent meditation up to about 7 minutes. Don't go wild on it. Keep using the breathing space meditations, the breathing space and the breathing space with difficulty. Keep practicing the silent meditating. Practice that gently curious, am I being spammed? Do you know? Practice pivoting from oh my goodness me, this thought feels so real, into it's just a thought and I have choices about how to respond. And if you find yourself well and truly hooked this week, have a go at the mind Aikido process. That's my name for it, mind Aikido. It's usually actually called verbal Aikido, but I much prefer mind Aikido. And I'm going to send through the body scan for sleep and give that a go as well. And please don't forget, this is very remiss of me, but remember that thing about keep trying to do the everyday tasks, a different one each week, a different one each day, perhaps. Clean your teeth mindfully, shower mindfully, read mindfully, listen to music mindfully, drive mindfully. Just bringing it to, so even if we're not always meditating, we are applying mindfulness to the stuff that we do. So thank you all so much. I've got no idea what the time is, but Michelle, wow, the evening has flown past. It has, hasn't it?
It has really flown past. And I disappeared in that last mindfulness session because I was disturbed by my husband, who said, "What am I doing for tea?"
How funny is that? Michelle's come back to say, thanks for the Viktor Frankl recommendation. 2/3 of the way through, and it's an eye-opener. Again, it's not an easy read, is it always? But it is a brilliant book. Yeah. And I know Sarah was telling me that that's one that she has in her house, and a sort of a real presence in their house, a top book. So we'll record this and we'll get out to you the new meditation. Thank you very much, everybody. Lots of that, and have really good weeks. Find the joy that's there to be had, and sit with the difficulties and unhook. Thank you all so much, and
Thank
have
you.
great weeks. And we'll send through all the stuff tomorrow, and I'll
Yes.
switch off the recording now.
I'm
Okay,
really
everybody.
enjoying it. Take care, everyone. Have a restful week.
Yeah, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you again. Thanks, everybody. That's lovely.